In Book 4, line 296, we've just seen a dramatic speech given by Jupiter and Mercury, coming back to yet again remind Aeneas that he needs to refocus and keep his eye on the prize, and sitting in Carthage is not going to accomplish that. So, at this point now, Dido has learned that Aeneas is readying his troops to leave, and we see her response. So in the first two lines, let me just encourage you to listen to the meter mark a little bit of a tone pace and change, I should say, in these first three lines of your assignment. At regina dolos, quis fallere possit amantem, praesensit, motusque scepit prima futuros, omnia tutta temens. Adempia fama furenti Dei tulit armari classem cursus parari. That much. So if you go back and listen to that, what's the predominant meter that you hear there? You hear several spondies, really marking, but the queen sensed the deceits. And so that will set up our passage. We see Fama making a return here. So the same unholy rumor. What does she do? She, as your textbook tells you, day to it, should be interpreted as reports. She reports to the Furenti. That should be interpreted as going with the Dido, to the raging one, to her raging, dative present participle. And that will also set up for us a lovely indirect statement. There's your head verb. And there is the accusative infinitive construction. Okay. It goes on then. She, inops animi. This is a particular adjective that needs to take a genitive with it, as your book points out. So she, lacking any mind, rages. Consider all the ways that Dido has been described up to this point. Now take a look at the types of language that are becoming more frequently used to describe her. Now she is in Cainsa, and we can go ahead and return to that conversation about the power of fire and fire imagery that we have had. This is no different. And then she bakatur. This is the verb. This is a very specific historical analogy to celebrating the rites of Bacchus. Greek tragedies written about this particular topic. Okay, and then we have a simile here, qualis, that talks specifically about how Dido will be raging. She'll be raving and raging as of a Bacchant, a celebrator of the rites of Bacchus. To help navigate you through this particular similes grammar, audito Bacco should be interpreted here as an ablative absolute, and the triertica orgia are going to be the subject of the verb stimulant. Okay, and then vocat, nocturnus is going to, with katairon, be your subject of the verb vocat there. And hopefully that should help get you through that particular simile with some really different vocabulary and references. Okay, so finally, with these, walkabos here should be interpreted as voices. She further addresses Aeneas. And boy, is she not happy. Dissimularet iam sperasti perfide. And if you can hear some of that tone that Virgil has written in there, that's exactly how you want to hear this. She starts off with a biting and savage question. Sperasti is our second person perfect tense verb here with the complementary infinitive of dissimulare. Did you hope to hide? This is the vocative with which she addresses Aeneas. And tantum will come down here and describe nefas. Okay, tantum to nefas. Okay. Or did you hope to be able to hide, I should say, and silent to depart from me terra. From here, she begins a line of questioning that comes fast and rapid. I strongly encourage you to examine the meter on your own in this particular passage and find some sort of pace and direction to her speech. So when we get to the necte noster amor, necte data dextra condam, nec moritura tenet crudeli funeredido. What device is at play there in those lines? There's a few of them. With the neck, neck, neck is what I hope you see in the repetition. That is definitely polysyndeton, as neck is a conjunction, and because it's the same word being repeated, it's also an anaphora. Nicely done. So she pelts Aeneas with these questions. And what I also want to draw your attention to now is that Dido herself has used this adjective to describe herself. What's that mean? What form of the verb is that? It's pretty powerful. We saw a very similar thing when we examined the description of Priam getting ready to do battle with Pyrrhus, if you remember back to that part. Okay, quinetiam. Quinetiam. In this part, she's almost in complete disbelief that this is really happening because it's still in the Iberno Sidera. Right? What time of year is that? Under the winter star, in the winter star, it's still the winter. Okay? So moliri, to undertake, and properas is the verb that's going to govern that. So do you still, she says in disbelief, even prepare to undertake the fleet into action during this time of year and to go? So there are your two infinitives, moliri and ire, through the deep. First she called Aeneas perfide. Now she calls him crudelis. This is getting tough for Dido. That's an understatement. At the quid, now she really begins to question his motive for leaving. And here we have what your book helps you with is something we're going to call an anticipatory subjunctive. And there's no way on the planet I would expect you to necessarily know these things. That one actually is coming down a little bit later. But for peteres and maneret and peteretur, we are using subjunctives. We're using imperfect subjunctives, which are suggesting that he's doing something that can't happen. And in this case, what is that? She asks, what? If you are not seeking agro aliena, foreign fields, or an unknown home, she says. So in other words, you're doing something completely mysterious to yourself. You don't even know where you're going. But what if even ancient Troy remained? Would you still seek, and in this case it's rendered as a passive, would Troy still be sought under this condition? That's insane, she's thinking. And then a very different tone begins. And I think that's probably one of the most painful two words in this entire epic. Did you flee me? Then she proceeds to remind him of their marriage. Right. Per connubia nostra. Per inceptos humanaios. She's in utter and complete disbelief. As she, and per ego has lacrimas dextram quituam. Again, the repetition of per. And I draw your attention to this parenthetical aside. Within there is quite an interesting and poignant chiasmus. See if you can find that and be prepared to identify the A and B elements within that line. As we come down here then, si bene quid. We have that si meaning if, and any time you have a quid following that, please remember to understand that as an aliquid. The speech is starting to take a different tone here. A tone of desperation, perhaps, you might think it to be. She says, if I deserved anything, bene, de te, anything at all. Notice then the verb miserere. That's a tricky one. I want you to make sure you understand that you are dealing here with a second person singular imperative. That is an imperative. Take pity on. It's also a form that will require a genitive to be with it. And there you have the domus labentis. Istam, then you have to put off all the way to menten, and you see a second imperative here in exue. Put off. If there is any, and again this will be an aliquis, if there's any place for prayers. My God, she says, please don't go. Now the tone changes yet again. She tries to be a little more assertive with the fact that it's Aeneas's responsibility for the situation she's in and the emotional mental condition she's in. Te propter. Te propter eundum. Lots of anaphora in this passage. The eundum here refers to te, meaning the same you, on account of all of this. These are my neighbors who now hate me. My pudor, the thing which I held so dear, and how dear is expressed right here. And she moans the loss of her reputation. Again, we see this self-proclaimed adjective, moribundam. To whom do you abandon me about to die? Hospes. That hurts. That is supposed to be biting and to the core. As she follows it up with this parenthetical statement. Ox solum nomen coniam de conjugarestat. This name alone remains from the marriage. Coniam meaning since. Then she asks herself a rhetorical question. Quid moror? What do I delay? And then she lays forth the various scenarios that could happen well next. And Anna had warned of this as well. Shall I now anticipate the attack of my frater Pygmalion? Shall I wait to be led away, captured by Gaetulian Iarbas? Realistic possibilities that could well happen. As the speech comes to an end, she laments very painfully, if only some. Now the suspense here to find out what the qua is, in the aliqua here is describing, has to be maintained as you go through the whole passage. Force yourself to go word for word here. Saltum si, qua, mihi, de te, suscepta fuisset. That's your verb. Pluperfect, passive, subjunctive. Antefugam, before the flight. Suboles. There is your feminine nominative singular. If only some offspring I could have been had as a child, by you, from you to me, before the flight, your escape. If only I could have had your child, she says. If only in my palace a little Aeneas Ruderet could play, and a little Aeneas who, however, would bring you back to me in your face. If only when I look in the eyes of what could have been my small son, I would see your face. This would be the result. I would perhaps seem not completely conquered or completely abandoned. It's a powerful speech. Now I want to see if you can go back to the beginning of the speech here and see if you can track some of the emotional progress that the tones start from and switch into, and I'll offer you my suggestions for that. At dissimulare here, what's the emotion that this passage seems to begin with for you in your interpretation? I would offer that she begins remarkably angry. Disbelief. She can't believe what has happened. As she moves into the questioning and asks about, my goodness sakes, even if you knew where you were going, would you go in this weather? She's pleading, almost to the point of trying to rationalize with Aeneas. Then the emotions set in as she realizes what is going on and the fact that she does not see these situations and circumstances of her marriage in the same context that Aeneas did. Now we have despair. Pity me. Take pity on what has happened to me. We continue on to the discussion of the impending potential attack of her brother, and this is pure fear as she realizes how alone she is going to be at this point and how desperate her situation has become, all the way to the very end where you can sense her regret at what she wanted to have that never came to fulfillment. Powerful passage. Next up, you'll see Aeneas's response.